Hi everyone, it's lovely to see you. I'm Lorna and we're reading The Mystery of the Smugglers' Wreck by Helen Moss, and this is Chapter 6, A Shock at Pirate Cove. Joe Gordon placed both hands on the table and leaned over as if he'd been punched in the stomach. Emily was worried for a moment, but when Joe looked up, he was grinning as if he'd just won the lottery on a rollover week. Without a word, he sat down, pulled his laptop from his shoulder bag, and opened up a file. Scott and Emily leaned in closer to see the scanned image of a tattered old document. The ink had faded to a muddy brown, but the old-fashioned handwriting with its loops and flourishes was still clear. "This is Thomas Pendragon's letter to his son," Joe explained, "the one I told you about. Look at this line." He pointed to the screen. Emily did her best to decipher the elaborate script. "A fine 8-sided eight-sided compass worked in brass and silver," she read aloud. "8-sided," Scott exclaimed. "That means it was octagonal." "Thanks for clearing that up for us, Einstein," Jack snapped. He was well and truly fed up with being ignored. "Exactly," Joe said. "I didn't dare to believe that you'd really stumbled across Pendragon's body, but now I'm convinced. You couldn't have known the compass was octagonal unless you'd actually seen it. Well done." Emily began stuffing her notes back into her bag. "We could be kitted up to dive again in half an hour." "Hold on," Joe threw up his hands. "We can't dive this afternoon. That's what I was just talking to Ryan about. The afternoon tide means the currents are too strong." Emily's face fell. Then she brightened again. "First thing tomorrow, it'll be light by 6. Joe laughed. "You don't give up, do you? But I'm afraid tomorrow morning I've got a group of American tourists booked in. I'm charging for guided diving tours of the wreck to help fund the project." Joe looked at Scott and Emily's crestfallen expression. "Here's what I'll do. While I'm with the Americans, I'll check the compass is still there, but I promise I won't touch it. We'll all dive down together later in the morning, and Kelly can film us all finding the compass together. It'll make a great scene for her documentary." Emily thought the plan was perfect. She high-fived with Joe and Scott. It was all so exciting. They'd soon have the compass, and then they'd have the secret to finding the smugglers' hiding place. Would it be a map, she wondered, or a set of coded directions, or even a riddle? She couldn't wait to find out. Jack, meanwhile, was less impressed. He was going to be left out yet again. He almost wished Scott had never seen the crummy compass. The next morning, Emily was too impatient to wait for Joe Gordon to return from his dive with the American tourists to find out whether he'd seen the compass. She insisted they all row out to Pirate Cove in her little boat Gemini to meet him there the moment he surfaced. Perched on the rocks that surrounded the little half-moon beach, Emily trained her binoculars on the orange buoy near Ryan Tredovick's motorboat, waiting for the group to come up from the wreck. At last she spotted the dark, sleek heads beginning to pop out of the water like a family of seals. She waved wildly to attract Joe's attention. "I think he's seen us." Sitting next to her, Scott was playing it cool, but deep down he was so wound up he'd not been able to eat the scrambled eggs Aunt Kate had made for breakfast. He grabbed the binoculars for a look. Then he remembered his "Be Nice to Jack" pledge to the shark. "They've surfaced," he called to his brother. "Come and see." But Jack shrugged his shoulders and continued sulking quietly in the background. He'd almost refused to come on this stupid compass quest, but Emily had wanted to bring drift, and he didn't fancy being Billy No-Mates all morning. Scott gave up and returned to the binoculars. The divers had clambered aboard Ryan's motorboat. Kelly and the tourists were all sitting around removing their masks and air cylinders. Meanwhile, Joe was climbing into the little inflatable tender. He pulled the cord to start the outboard motor, and then he was zipping over the waves to the beach. "Here he comes," Scott cried. Emily jumped up, hopping from foot to foot. "I can't wait." Together they ran into the shallows to help put the tender into the beach. "Did you see the skeleton?" Scott asked before Joe was even out of the water. "Yes, hanging upside down, just as you predicted." Emily was taken aback. She'd expected Joe to be all fired up with enthusiasm, but his voice was strained and flat, and his square jaw was rigid. "The compass, did you see it?" she asked anxiously. Joe Gordon suddenly let the tender drop onto the sand. He straightened up and marched up the beach. Scott and Emily ran after him. Halfway to the rocks, Joe stopped and turned round. "Oh yeah, I saw the compass all right." He fished into the waterproof bag on his belt and held out a closed fist. Scott and Emily exchanged bewildered glances. If Joe had found the compass, why did he look like he'd just got a parking ticket and been wheel clamped? Joe Gordon opened his hand. Lying on his smooth brown palm was a compass, a small round green plastic compass on a length of damp elastic. The flimsy arrow quivered. It wasn't even pointing north. This compass certainly had no clues as to the location of the smugglers' hoard. Only the words "Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you?" stamped around the rim, and a picture of Scooby-Doo and Shaggy running across the middle. It looked as if it had come out of a Christmas cracker. Joe narrowed his eyes at Scott. "Is this your idea of a joke?" Scott shook his head, barely able to speak. "But that's not it," he croaked. "The compass I saw was really old. It was all crusted up." Joe sighed. "Yeah, it's called concretion. That's what this would look like if it had been down there for hundreds of years. This thing's obviously not been in the water more than a couple of days." Emily stared at the toy compass. She hardly dared think it, but had Scott made a mistake? Coming face to face with a big shark, even a harmless one, could mess with your mind. "Are you sure this isn't what you saw?" she asked him gently. Scott's mouth dropped open. He couldn't have looked more stunned if Scooby-Doo had cruised past on a surfboard. Emily felt terrible for doubting him. "Sorry," she mumbled. "It's just so weird. I don't get it." "Well, I get it," Joe snapped. "You two thought you'd play a little prank and pretend you found the compass." "What about the 8 sides?" Scott stammered. "You said yourself I couldn't have known that." "You must have sneaked a look at my notes somehow." Joe turned and started walking back to the tender. "No way," Scott and Emily called after him. Jack looked up from the rocks where he'd been throwing sticks for drift. He'd heard the whole thing. He had to admit he'd secretly felt a tiny ripple of satisfaction when Joe first said the compass was a dud. Served Scott right for making such a song and dance about it. But now Joe Gordon was going too far. He was accusing Scott of lying, and he was clearly barking up the wrong tree. Scott didn't do pranks. He considered them to be immature, unlike Jack, who thought they were hilarious. Scott just wouldn't have the imagination to cook up something as wacky as planting a Scooby-Doo compass round a skeleton's neck. Jack knew his brother better than anyone in the world. Yes, Scott had been boring and smug and irritating about finding that compass, but he definitely hadn't been lying about it. And as for Emily, she'd never joke about smuggling. It was her one true love. Jack ran down the beach. "Hey, stop," he yelled, wading into the water after Joe. "If my brother said there was a crusty old 8-sided compass down there, then there was." Drift joined Jack, standing up to his shoulders in the surf to add some warning barks of his own. He didn't know what this was all about. Joe had seemed like a decent sort of human. He'd given Drift his leftover bacon rinds at breakfast, but he'd raised his voice at Emily and made her ears droop. Drift wasn't going to stand for that. Joe looked up from starting the outboard motor. "I admire your loyalty, but how do you explain this?" He flicked the Scooby-Doo compass into the air with his thumb. Jack opened his mouth, but Joe didn't wait for an answer. He was already roaring off so fast that the front of the tender reared up out of the waves. Jack caught the compass and stuffed it into his shorts pocket. The friends had rowed Gemini almost all the way back to the promontory before anyone broke the silence. Scott leaned on the oars and held his head in his hands. He'd never felt so humiliated in his life. It was as if a giant foot had descended from the sky and squashed him flat. "I just don't understand it," he muttered. Jack grinned. "Admit it. Your brain's finally blowing a fuse and you've started seeing things." Scott scooped water with one of his oars and drenched his brother in a cold shower. "I'm not seeing things." "Okay," Jack laughed. "A big fish ate it. Maybe that shark you saw, like the crocodile in Peter Pan that swallowed an alarm clock." Emily rolled her eyes. "And this shark also left the Scooby-Doo compass behind in its place, did it?" She shook her head. "No, it's obvious, isn't it? The Pendragon compass has been stolen." Join me for Chapter 7.